Thank you again, and thank you all for creating the space for myself and fellow candidates to engage with you all. My name is Jennifer Gutierrez, and I'm a first-time candidate. I'm running for City Council in the 34th District. That's Bushwick and Williamsburg and Brooklyn, Ridgewood and Queens. I am a native New Yorker. I am a daughter of immigrants, and I'm a public school kid. I'm actually a District 24 graduate, so that covers Ridgewood as well. I have been working in the community and serving District 34 for close to 10 years. Shortly after spending some time in Arizona, I had the opportunity to work for then Council Member Diana Reyna, and that is how I got activated in this community. That's how I really began to work alongside organizers that had been actively fighting against displacement, environmental justice advocates fighting for cleaner air and greater green space, advocates demanding full funding for our schools and desegregation of our schools. And I think part of the reason that I'm running is because I was encouraged by women in my community to run. This was not a lifelong dream of mine. I loved community organizing. My background is in coalition building, and that's what I wanted to keep doing. It was really this last year in the pandemic where women who were literally keeping our communities alive, like all of the women that were leading the mutual aid efforts and food distribution efforts, women like my sister, a third-year resident at Kings County, and her wife, a midwife at Wyckoff, that really encouraged me to run because we need experience with regards to COVID recovery and to get us out of this budget deficit. We don't have the time to waste on candidates that, are going to emphasize hashtags over real planning, over real solutions. So I'm running to represent two boroughs that I love. I was born in Queens. I live in Bushwick. I think it's a privilege to get to represent two boroughs. It's one of 3 council districts that do. I am wildly and colossally familiar with every corner of my district. I have been really lucky to build coalitions with a lot of folks here and have been able to secure a lot of key endorsements. And I'm looking to continue building, because anyone that tells you they have all the solutions is lying. I believe the solutions will come from the community, and I think my experience will allow me to do that in building with all of y'all to get us through COVID, to get us through this deficit, and a stronger 34th district. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So the first question is, just tell us about your viability, your path to victory, basically why you think you're going to win.
Sure. I mean, I hope I'm going to win, but I think as far as viability, I have a really strong team. Native New Yorkers are all on my team. I have a strong coalition of volunteers, folks from the neighborhood, folks throughout the boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens. And I think a lot of that has to do with just my work experience, working in a number of citywide coalitions related to housing, strengthening NYCHA, schools. And so, I think working in District 34, I managed Antonio's campaign in 2013 against Vito Lopez. I think I understand what it takes to win, and what it takes to win is like community, 100%. It's people power. You can't buy this victory. You're not going to get it anywhere else. You need to be on the ground and talking to voters. So, we're being as safe as we can, but I think we have a solid field plan. Like I mentioned in my intro, I do have a pretty great slate of endorsements from folks like Congresswoman Velasquez, Councilmember Reynoso, District Leader Amelia Dick Gowden. I'm really excited about that, as well as, Public Advocate Jumaane Williams. And so it's really like a broad coalition of support. I also have labor endorsements and union endorsements, as well as just folks on the ground, folks in the neighborhood who are supporting my campaign. So we're expecting a higher turnout than we saw in 2017. And obviously with ranked choice voting, we're continuing to lay out that strategy, but our strategy is 100% ground game. We're gonna lean into a lot of the endorsements that we have, and continuing phone banking, text banking. We are door knocking for those that feel comfortable. We're all double masking and vaccinated. But yeah, I think my path to victory is like leaning into these relationships that I have, introducing myself to folks. I'm doing that every single day. I'm out on doors every single day. I'm really committed to this. And so I think that is why I will win.
That's great. Thank you. Second question. Over the last 40 years, rents in New York City have risen twice as fast as they did in the 40 years prior. What is your solution to address the rent affordability crisis the city currently faces?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a lifelong renter. The reason my family was able to stay in this country was because my dad scored a rent stabilized unit in Queens in 1980. And my family still lives in it to this day. And so 100%. I think we've seen that a lot in Williamsburg and Bushwick. And I think more, I think exponentially in Ridgewood in like the last 10 years, where, I'm very familiar with Ridgewood, how it was in the 90s. I think what we're seeing is a lot of what Bushwick and Williamsburg was experiencing just a few years ago. It just seems, I think, more heightened. I think some of the things that we can do, obviously, if rent continues to go up, wages need to go up. And I know a lot of that stuff is with the state and the federal government, but there's a big role I think the council can play in building coalitions with our colleagues in government, because the conversation has solely been about rent affordability and is seldom about wage increases and protections for workers. And so that really needs to be a pathway that we focus on. I'm sorry, that's my dog. Lastly, and then secondly, also accountability for developers. We have this 421A state program that's about to expire next year. The city has MIH. There's zero accountability for these developers. So they benefit from these tax subsidies. They are required to provide a small, but nonetheless, an amount of affordable housing units that they can completely get away with not providing. And it happens all the time. It happened in Bushwick. It happened at the Reingold site. And so, there really needs to be, first of all, we need to revisit MIH. We need to revisit 421A. I think the goal is not screwed up, but I think every single method that has been used has screwed over the working class New Yorkers and immigrant New Yorkers and low income New Yorkers. Also, I think comprehensive planning. If done correctly, is really going to be able to provide principles for every community district. We're going to have a really good sense of where displacement is happening, where parts of the district are more vulnerable. And that's going to help communities when they face rezonings, for example, in determining what their needs are long before real estate tries to plan on their behalf. And then I have a couple of other points, which is just stronger enforcement on rent regulation laws. We have a dwindling rent stabilization stock. And what happens is it's way too easy for these owners to destabilize a unit. There's tactics, we know them, through MCIs, through harassment, to be able to kick these tenants out. And there's very little enforcement and I think value on these rent regulated and rent stabilized units. So if we strengthen the enforcement, making it almost impossible to deregulate a unit, I think that's going to help us keep affordability. And lastly is having the city council really invest on community land trusts and making it so that we are preserving low income and affordable housing in perpetuity for New Yorkers.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry, my internet jumped a little bit there. That's why I turned off my camera. So hopefully that helps. And you also went over a little bit
Right.
with that, but I think it's okay because
Okay.
yeah, no, that's quite all right. I lost the camera for a minute. That's why. Okay. Question number 3. What is your vision for a full COVID recovery?
I think remind me, I have 2 minutes, right?
Yes, 2 minutes.
Okay.
And I've been putting them in the chat, but if you want me to jump in and say 30 seconds or something like that, I can.
Okay. No, I'll open the chat. I don't think I had it open. Sorry. So I think for a full COVID recovery, I want to be honest, I think a lot of the things that the city needs are things that we needed before a pandemic. As we all know, this pandemic only exacerbated a lot of the issues that existed, especially in communities of color. So for me, it's healthcare. It's ensuring and fully funding access to healthcare. So every single person that needs access to it can get it regardless of their immigration status. For me, it is fully restoring funding to agencies that were already struggling to begin with, like DSNY for garbage collection, for residential composting. It's also restoring funds to parks. I think in a council district like the 34th, where we rank 47th in park space, the little park space that we're grasping onto is a lifeline for people. And so when you cut maintenance budgets for these departments, the quality of life changes and it's drastic day and night from like one day to the other. I also think we need a COVID recovery that is protecting tenants, that's protecting homeowners and small businesses. responsible recovery is also one that focuses on job creation and job training programs, particularly for our LGBTQIA plus youth, our homeless youth, our working class people. So it really has to be, and these are all issues that existed before COVID, but we need to prioritize funding and sustaining funding for these like very common sense programs and initiatives to make sure that people are protected and that everyone has a safety net. Every single person needs a safety net. I learned that from COVID. Tenants, every single tenant needs access to legal representation, regardless of their income. I'm a renter. I'm far from wealthy, but I would have needed access to legal representation, and it doesn't exist. So expanding right to counsel will 100% be a priority for me in COVID recovery.
Perfect.
I made
That was
it.
my
All
that
right.
was my timer going right off when you did that. That was perfect. Um, Fourth question, which is similar, it kind of piggybacks off of that one. But since the start of the pandemic, a lot of attention has been paid on where budgets need to be cut. But coming out of the pandemic, where do you see opportunities for growth, and what sort of revenue generators can the city employ going forward?
I think there's a lot of opportunities for growth. Like I said, when we as a city really invest in job creation, I think for me personally, working in this district for as long as I have, manufacturing. We are a community where over 70% of the manufacturing jobs in East Williamsburg, in Bushwick, is accessible to people on foot, meaning people who work there live in this community. And this last administration and the Bloomberg administration really turned their back on that history, that rich manufacturing history that we have. And so for me, I think an area that we can grow is job creation and really looking at innovative job industries, and really investing in manufacturing again. It's solid. It's a low barrier to entry. People can make a lot more than minimum wage. They're great jobs. And so I think if we focus on that, that would be meaningful. Obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm a big proponent of reducing drastically the budget for PD, to really be thoughtful and reinvesting it in agencies that make sense. So for me, it's investing it in childcare, making it universal, making it accessible to everyone. I'm a Beacon School kid. It did a lot more for me than childcare. And so for me, knowing good and well that District 24 students and families don't all have access to after school, it's a lottery, I think that's heinous. And I think if we think about our budget, we can use money intelligently to invest it in ensuring that every single family has access to after school and that every single family has access to childcare if they need it. And then lastly, I think we can grow composting. If we are serious about our environmental justice goals, we really have to start thinking about reducing waste. It works in other cities. It's not this novel idea. And we saw composting and DSNY see drastic cuts to their budget last year. And an area that I would like to see grow is residential composting, allowing more people to have access to it, so that we can get to our 0 by 30 goals in a reasonable time.
Perfect. Appreciate it. So the last question is a little bit more of a softball one because we want to try to not end with, something about the pandemic, obviously. But if you're comfortable to disclose, you don't have to because I know some candidates are not. But do you have is there a person you are backing for mayor, or at least a ranked choice version of who
Like
you're backing for mayor?
Yeah, man, I get asked this all the time, especially when like I'm out talking to voters. They ask me like, "Hey, who are you supporting for mayor?" It's hard to say. I have had the opportunity to meet with and talk with a couple of them. I think folks like Diane Morales and Maya Wiley, I want to say it's because they're women, but honestly, I think they have a really good head on their shoulders and really understand what we need. I was just with Maya last weekend in Ridgewood and talking to business owners, and her mom was a small business owner, and she has plans for that. I think when we talk about what our city needs moving forward, especially after last year's budget, we were talking about social workers, right? Like we need more social workers. Well, Diane is one. Here's an opportunity to elect one, and let's really support it and let's really be about it and see how our how our city can thrive. Catherine Garcia, I know because of her chairmanship at sanitation, I think she's great. I think Scott has a ton of experience. So I'm kind of in the middle. I'm definitely like leaning towards the women, but I think I haven't picked one just yet. I'm being really mindful about it more than usual because I'm a candidate. And so when they reach out to me about wanting to do like walking tours, I'm very mindful about it, about where they're going, about what they want to see, because I, don't want to exploit this district for a potential candidate or potential mayor that's not really serious about the things that we need here. So I'm still going through that process, but I think I mentioned everyone that I'm like, they're going to be in my ranked choice for sure.
Okay, that's great.
Helpful at all, but I feel like a lot of people are kind of like,
yeah, no, I'm kind of on that same boat. I'm not going to say the same people because I don't want to make this sound like I'm agreeing with you.
No, but
fair, but yeah, I think a lot of people are in that boat. Oh, wait,
totally.
there's another person. I got it. Oh, it's Lisa. Okay, I let one more person in. This is the last question. I know we're way ahead of time, so this is really good. But we still are going to do 20 minutes, which gives you
Nice.
another like 10 minutes. So we'll do this, then we'll field a few questions.
Okay.
So the last question is a closing statement, and if you got 2 minutes to make a closing statement, and yeah, please, if you can, focus a little bit on the Ridgewood portion, just to give the people that are in the room, an idea.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, 2 minutes, right? You said. Let me just.
Yeah, you got 2 minutes, but like I said, theoretically we've got another like 10 minutes for your 20-minute portion, so you got some time.
Okay. Perfect. Well, so once again, thank you all for this opportunity, for listening to me. And if I see you in the district, thank you for engaging with me. A lot of what I'm doing now is asking people what they think their local members should be resolving for. What are some of the things that they care about? And we care about the same things. I mentioned childcare. I mentioned after school programming. I mentioned I'm a renter. 85% of our district are renters and wanting to stay in their homes. I'm a daughter of immigrants. Immigration reform and access for immigrants and language access are things that are incredibly important to me because that's where I come from. Those are my experiences. And so I say all of these things because that's exactly how I intend to lead. My mom was a domestic worker for 25 years. She cleaned apartments. I used to go to her cleaning gigs with her to help interpret and help negotiate her salaries. My dad was a baker before becoming disabled when I was 10, and I used to help navigate the disability claim and calls with the insurance company. And I say this because my story is not very much different than a lot of people in our community, and you need people that can speak to that have those experiences from the inside to really make the decisions that matter out in City Hall. And so I'm running for them. I'm not running for any other reason than to represent my community, to make it stronger, to bring more resources, and to bring about equity. For way too long, real estate has had a stronghold. They have had the priority when it comes to our communities, which is still predominantly a community of color. And so that's something that's really important to me. And as a woman of color, as a daughter of immigrants, I think it needs to come from a place of experience and a place of like real collaboration with people on the ground to make those changes a reality. So I'm running for a stronger district, for a stronger city, and I'm building towards that. And, regardless of where I land after June 22nd, I'm still going to be here. I live here. This is where my mom lives. This is where I live with my family. I'm not going anywhere. So I will always be here to serve the community, to move us forward, and to really bring about justice and equity where we need it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then we have a few questions that we got. If you have about 5 minutes, we've been fielding a few questions. I'll turn my camera back on so it's not weird that I'm asking you questions from a black box. So one of the questions, one of our members also asked this of Scott, so we figured it makes sense to ask you. So the way our district is basically gerrymandered, if we're going to be honest about it, the park, Grover Cleveland Park is in your district, the high school is in District 30, and it kind of becomes this no man's land a little bit, but also that park specifically is really important for that area. Because it's kind of in an area, it's in one of the areas with fewer green spaces. So what can you do, or what would you do to kind of make sure that Grover Cleveland Park is an emphasis in your district for, just to make it
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Charlene. She's a big advocate for the park. So, I used to go to that park when I was little, actually, because it's pretty sizable. And in District 34, like I mentioned, we don't have significant park space. You would have to cross into other districts, to get green space. What we have in the south side of Williamsburg, it's mostly like playgrounds above the BQE. In Bushwick, we've got a couple of playgrounds and one park, Knickerbocker Park. And in Ridgewood, we've got Grover Cleveland and Star Playground. And Star Playground, I think, has seen some investments from Councilmember Reynoso and former Borough President Katz. I think Grover Cleveland obviously also needs equitable attention. But actually, one of the proposals that we got during my time leading participatory budgeting for District 34 was improving the playground. I know that the soccer field had recently gotten some upgrades, but it is a beautiful space. It's a massive space. I love when I go over there, I see families with their young kids. Like it's serving its purpose. And so absolutely, I mean, my goal is to fully invest in our parks so that, we are maximizing on the little amount of park space that we have in District 34, supporting maintenance and more programming and more capital infrastructure at Grover Cleveland will be something I'm committed to, because I know that it hasn't seen any investments in a long time. So it is something that I'm committed
to. Another question. So I'm actually going to throw in a question I have really quick, because you mentioned manufacturing in the district, which I think is a really interesting idea. Also because where our district split is right along the manufacturing zone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So can you just give us a little bit more information about how you would address that, or just, any more details if you have on that?
Yeah. I mean, and specifically in Ridgewood, the manufacturing jobs that were there, or the manufacturing businesses that were there, were owned by immigrants, families that all lived in Ridgewood and greater Ridgewood area. And so what we're seeing is in other parts of District 34 is the fact that, administrations have not been supportive of manufacturing job retention. What we're seeing in parts of Williamsburg, which is very scary, is like manufacturing, M1, M2, which is maybe more M2, are being used for, hotels or office spaces, which, is the job industry as well. But it's not, these are usually like service jobs, low paying jobs. And when we're comparing it to manufacturing jobs that are oftentimes unionized or paying more than minimum wage, I think the greater net return is really investing in manufacturing. And so for me, it would be really working with the administration to prioritize and to protect manufacturing. And that's exactly what SOMA did. The bid that leads off the end of Myrtle Avenue in Ridgewood was, this idea to invest in manufacturing, support businesses. Oftentimes these are also small businesses, regardless of the fact that they're manufacturing, and they're employing people from the neighborhood. People walk to work. And so for me, it's something that is, I learned from my predecessor and predecessor before him, this is part of our history. And so this is really important for us when we talk about preservation in the face of gentrification, that we be serious about it and investing in manufacturing job retention, in planning, in working out ways to attract more manufacturing businesses to have their businesses here in our district is going to be key, I think, for our economy for the long run.
Perfect. And then Frank had one question, and I think we will end it on that because we're getting really close to the 20 minutes. He wanted to know, what community organizations have you worked with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Frank means specifically in Ridgewood, but in my close to a decade here, I've worked with some mostly like related to tenant and housing. In Ridgewood specifically, I've worked with the Greater Ridgewood Youth Council, specifically helping to recruit folks from our community, youth from our community, land after school programs, along with Bob. Also with the Greater Ridgewood Historical Society, the folks that lead the Underdog House, and what's the other name of the Ridgewood group? Greater Ridgewood. It's like one of the tenant advocacy groups as well in Ridgewood, and I've worked with them. We've collaborated on a couple of events and have been able to send tenants to get assistance from them. I think those are specifically the ones in Ridgewood.
I'm just gonna allow you to, if you want to open it up further, because I'm assuming Frank was just asking for kind of like.
In general, yeah. I mean, some of the organizations, I mean, I think official, like nonprofit groups, some of the ones that I've worked with in the community, like Southside United Los Sures, El Puente, which is an environmental and human rights organization. I have really good relationships with St. Nick's Alliance, another housing organization. Some of the groups in Bushwick, like Brooklyn Ballers. More recently, like some of the informal groups, like some of the mutual aid networks and some of the like cleanup groups, like Clean Bushwick Initiative. I've worked with, this is by no means an endorsement, but I've worked with members of the Ridgewood Tenants Union. They've been a part of our office's broader anti-displacement efforts. Yeah, I would say, I mean, Riseboro as well. I mean, I think it's like a number of organizations, but they're all, if not all of them, are based in District 34, serving majority of District 34 residents.
Perfect. Jen, thank you so much. This has been really great. And just to reiterate what I mentioned before, we're recording this. We're going to get these translated, at least into Spanish. We may have some other languages, and then we're going to host them. And then we're sending out a, oh, wait, can you ask one more? Can we ask one more question? Lisa, I only asked him because Lisa Bloodgood is here from the Newtown Creek Alliance. And she wants to know if you have anything to say about Newtown Creek.
Hey, Lisa. Well, you missed my spiel about composting, by the way. And because of Lisa, I think it's important when we say we want clean air, we want clean soil too. But also I think the Newtown Creek is like an area that I would love to be more supportive of and be more like informed and educated on. I know I've been speaking with like a couple of residents from Ridgewood specifically about a potential garden behind Grover Cleveland. And I know that a lot of that came from this like lawsuit back in 2009 because of Newtown Creek. But yeah, to be honest, like I want to be supportive of it. I 100% think that we should be thinking about sustainability and innovative models that support our local ecosystem. And so, I mean, any way that I can be supportive, but I also want to say, like, I'm not an expert. And Lisa probably knows this, but my role is to, you know, to listen to folks. And I care about sustainability in a really deep way. District 34 is an environmental justice community, and Newtown Creek is in our district. And so, you know, however we can partner with advocates to make it sustainable and you know, have it serve our, you know, North Brooklyn and Ridgewood for as long as possible, I'm game for that.
Perfect. And yeah, for anyone who is listening after the fact, I just threw that question in because I saw Lisa joined literally like, you know, 10 minutes before we ended. So I didn't want to like leave her out of that. But yeah, thank you again. As I was saying before, we're gonna these are obviously recorded. We're gonna translate these, post them, and then we send them out to about 3,000 Democrats that's our newsletter within 8037B. Obviously, some of them are not gonna be in 34, but we're gonna put them up. That's my daughter. We're gonna put them up so all the Democrats can see them, even if they weren't able to make this. But before we go, do you have anything to add before we close?
No, I think the only thing I would say is, you know, I really appreciate the space and what you all are doing to get folks activated. Currently we're almost like finished up with our website. It's going to be a pretty like healthy policy piece. It's also going to be in Spanish, which is what's taking a little bit of time. But folks are also going to have the opportunity to like email about policy ideas and about, so like Lisa, please message me about Newtown Creek, and I just want to make sure that like you all know that I am an advocate for co-governance, and it starts from this campaign. So please utilize the site in the meantime to message and bring up any issues, even, you know, beyond the primary. It's really important to me. And thank you all once again for this opportunity.